Okay, let's get started. I'm Satya Sekhar, a developer advocate with APAC Developer Relations team, and this is the first time we are doing such a great event in ANZ region. I hope everyone is enjoying. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. The days were so fast that we are now at the final day of the event, um, and it's a big day. We have two great sessions lined up for today. The first session is going to be the Lightning Web Components session, and the second one is the Slack session. Welcome to the day 4 of this fantastic event where you can learn all about the latest products and features right from the product managers and experts. Before we get started, let me remind you that you can ask the questions. Um, I can show you the way you can do that. Yes. Um, on the top right corner, you can see Q&A panel, which you can use. You can click that and you can ask your questions at any point of time. And this is an excellent opportunity to interact with the product managers, so don't miss it. If you want to ask a question directly, please click the button, share my audio and video that you can see here, and we'll enable you to speak. You might find a lot of content on LWC on the web, but this session is unique and special. We'll learn all about the existing and upcoming tools from the product manager of LWC. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Bogdan Brinza. He's a Senior Director, Product Management, LWC. Now I request Bogdan to help us explore the existing and upcoming tools that allow us to build great Lightning apps. Welcome, Bogdan.
Thank you for the intro, Satya, and excited to be here. It's my coming back visit to Australia, virtually. I've been to Sydney a couple of times as part of my previous role, and greatly enjoyed the time there, except for the time difference, which the jet lag was furious. Other than that, it was fantastic. So let's talk about the Lightning apps and the Lightning platform. Before we start, a quick forward-looking statement. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about today are really, our plans, hopes, and aspirations, right? So don't take this as a, written commitment to do all of those things. Uh, uh, some things are outside of our control, and not everything that I'm going to be talking about today is guaranteed to happen, right? We'll work super hard to make it a reality, but life happens. Quick extended intro, like basically, why you should listen to me and like the work that I'm going to produce. I'm currently the PM lead on the Lightning Web Stack team, and my team owns Lightning Web Components, Lightning Web Runtime, UTAM testing framework, and observability framework. So all of the things we're going to be talking about today. And before that, I spent almost a decade working on one of the major web engines in Microsoft Edge, and I was the PM manager for tech like CSS, HTML, SVG, graphics, etc. You might see some of my public contributions from the past in W3C, the governing body for the web standards that all browsers follow. I was a SVG chair for a year. I contributed to CSS, HTML, and ARIA standards. And my GitHub and Twitter handle is Boggy Digital. I don't use Twitter much, but eventually, like if you DM me, I'll probably get back to you. It's probably better ways to contact me though. So let's get rolling. What are we going to be talking about today is great Lightning applications, right? I'm going to make a distinction what the great even means, right? And there's going to be 4 components that I mentioned earlier. We're going to be talking about Lightning Web Components, Lightning Web Runtime, UI testing framework, and the upcoming observability framework, which is literally called observability. So what is a great Lightning application, right? So to understand this, let's kind of contrast this state of the world. Like regardless of where you are in your development journey with Lightning, you probably create Lightning apps, right? Somehow. And if you add to that, standards-based, highly performant, extensible, scalable, testable, reliable, observable characteristics, then you basically are going to be building great Lightning applications. All of those are characteristics of the great Lightning. And to frame that, aids to do that for you are Lightning Web Components, Lightning Web Runtime, observability, and testing, right? There's so many more things in the Lightning Web Stack that we're not going to be talking today, like the data frameworks, the Lightning Web Security, and everything else. But we're going to scope this meeting for just those 4 things. So let's start with Lightning Web Components, right? And in my experience, when we talk about the Lightning Web Components, everybody is somewhere on this journey, right? Some people are just getting to know Lightning Web Components, so they would appreciate, some brief intro. Some people are a bit more advanced and kind of would appreciate, more, kind of like 401 or more advanced, pointers. And maybe you are like super advanced and you want to contribute code on the GitHub, right? So we have some content for all of you and some call to actions. So just assuming there's some folks who might actually appreciate getting to know what are Lightning Web Components, I want to very briefly touch on them. I'm not going to read like everything on the slide, but Lightning Web Components bring in enhanced productivity with web standards. They are like from the day one and into the future, we're building them with the standards in mind. We are driving some of those standards as well. We're contributing to move the web forward and to make the Lightning development experience better and easier. From the ground up, they were engineered for performance. That was basically the whole aspiration, like the primary reason we wanted to create something new, right, was to allow developers to create lightning fast experience, right, as simple as that. And they're compatible, easy to use. They can be created with a UI tools. They can be written as a code, right? There's multiple ways you can approach this. And there's no barriers on either path. If you're starting with your Lightning Web Components journey, right, there's few tips and tricks. There's some trailheads that I would still recommend. I'm assuming everybody's familiar with the Trailhead system, so I'm not going to spend time introducing that, right? But there's some great ways to get to know Lightning Web Components from the very entry level to a bit more advanced. There's a Lightning Web Components open source, right? The project lives on GitHub, and there's active pull requests, issues, and discussions happening there, as well as you can track what is the latest and greatest happening in the open there. When you're ready to go a bit deeper than the introductory stuff, there's a great blog post, I cannot recommend it enough, from one of the principal members of the technical staff in Salesforce, Pierre-Marie Dartos. He wrote a 2-part series on basically his short and concise summary of experience code review in 1,000 to 1,000 components inside Salesforce, web components inside Salesforce, right? So he distilled all of that into tips and tricks, right? And there's lots of great stuff there. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And hit me up in Q&A if you need the link. But I'm assuming you can see it there as well. And some of the features, some of the features that are coming soon to Lightning Web Components that I want to introduce to you. First of all of the information about Lightning Web Components is available on lwc.dev site. And you can see throughout the session, a lot of our frameworks are framework name .dev. So if you can try something like lwc.dev, you're probably gonna land where you expect. So some of the things that are already available in developer preview include Light DOM. It's in beta, right? And it allows you to project your components into the open DOM, basically like HTML, right? That allows you better stylability. You can use like the global styles. It allows you to like see in terms of your components for various reasons. You can integrate with things like Google Analytics and whatnot. Multiple reasons why you might want to do this. There's some reasons and some word of caution that like you should be aware that you are losing the inherent protection from the shadow DOM. Right? So like all your like innards of your components are going to be visible. Maybe that's something you want to do, maybe not. I will encourage you to think, carefully. We are making progress and working on the native shadow DOM, right? When the Lightning Web Component started, there were limitations in the browser support, and we had a synthetic shadow DOM polyfill. Now, after several years passed, we are, far ahead on this journey in all the browsers, and there's, clear path ahead to move to a native shadow DOM, and all of the performance and stability is going to bring to us. We are working on server-side rendering, right? That was requested many times, and I know it's in significant demand. Again, if that's something that you're looking forward to, I have some great news. In the future, it will be available relatively soon. Don't have a time frame yet, but soon trademark is my answer. So yeah, that's all I had for Lightning Web Components. I would encourage you to start this journey, and regardless of where you are in the journey, there's definitely something for you to start with, progress your knowledge, or look forward some new developments. Let's talk about Lightning Web Runtime, right? And you might be asking, like, what is Lightning Web Runtime, right? And the simplest summary I can give you is that it's non-opinionated way to configure and load the modules, services, and dependency providers that you need to build a modern JavaScript app, right? It's basically like it does a lot of like boilerplate for you, and it does it in a performant way that's fast, right? Like the page generation is going to happen at the build time, so you're already like getting fast page loads. By default, you don't have to do any significant work to get there. It is enjoyable local development experience, right? You can use your npm-based workflow. It's incredibly friction-free, pretty easy to get started and try it out. And it's powerful. It already has access to LWC, like Web Components we just talked about, and Salesforce platform. And we're actively working to make it better and better every release. So there's, in my mind, there's a bright future ahead for Lightning Web Runtime. Something to definitely keep in mind. Very brief, like how to get started with Lightning Web Runtime. You can try this on Node.js today. There's a guide we posted on the developers Salesforce.com, right? Pretty easy to find. If you go to the site, you can just search for LWR. That's basically the main content available there today. Easy to get started. The fun fact is that developer.salesforce.com itself is running on LWR. So we worked with the team, and they were one of our first customers to adopt this new platform. And we got a lot of feedback on, from them on how to make it even better. So more and more sites from Salesforce and our partners are going to be using LWR going forward. It's definitely the future for us. All right, now that we established the foundation, right, you can create your application, you can create your components, you can start developing your application. How do you actually keep it running and reliable going forward, right? So I'm going to talk very briefly about the UI testing framework that we are working on. It's called UTAM, UI Testing Automation Framework. And to introduce this framework, I want to talk about some of the problems that we heard from our internal teams and partners that they face today that prevent them from doing more testing and protecting the UI functionality. So one is it's basically comes down to there's a lot of barriers on this path, right? It's super hard to write the tests in a way that is easy to understand, easy to create, right? You have to select the elements somehow, and it's usually in a very fragile, brittle way, like the DOM selectors, right? XPath and whatnot. The test code is usually special, right? You have to write some special logic that looks for the elements and does some JavaScript magic to them. It doesn't follow your logic really clearly, the application logic really clearly, right? And the trivial changes to your application, they break the tests, right? And one of the common reasons we've heard the teams are not investing into more testing is that because they actually disable tests because of the code churn, right? It's easier to disable tests when it's failing instead of just trying to understand what failed, what change provoked that. We're all under very compressed timelines and tough schedules, so sometimes we have to do some shortcuts to get there. So UTAM changes it in we try to address literally every problem there, right? So I'm gonna kind of start from the bottom of the slide and introduce the page objects model. The page object is a declarative way to create entities of your application, right? Like think about like login page. The login might be an object, and it might have a login page. It might be an object, and it might have a login method, right? So not only that's more sensible way to describe your application, it also allows you to write very sensible and easy to read tests. You don't send some random arbitrary events, to click the buttons or, read the results from the page. You log in into your component, right? And you check the state that you expose in the page objects. There's a type system, behind all of this. So you create page objects of several types, and you get some boilerplate code for some common interactions, right? And from the day one, we use the CSS selector model that allows you to create way more durable, flexible, and expressive ways to select the elements on the page. And I want to highlight that you should probably listen to me because I was PM manager for the CSS for 7 years. So CSS is definitely a better way to approach this. Simple as that. So I want, like, even if I prefer that you just trusted me, but you don't have to. You can try it yourself, right? We have a utam.dev, right? Another example of the .dev website that we have that has, things like guides, tutorials, framework and schema definitions. I want to point you out to the hands-on tutorials, which is super easy way to try UTAM in your browser. Most of the code is already predefined for you there. So you can observe, learn, try things, and do some simple tasks to get better at that. We are pretty early in the UTAM journey. I want to be very transparent with you. We are aiming to have a generally available as open source project in spring next year release, right? And I would love to understand what barriers you see in your testing, right? If there's something that I missed in my presentation, please let me know. I would love to know that, right? As part of our releases, we're going to start releasing Salesforce built-in components page objects. So if you are using some of the Salesforce components and logic in your application, you definitely won't have to create page objects for that. I'm going to ship that for you. And going forward, we have some interesting roadmap for the UTAM. I can disclose everything, but I can describe in broad strokes what we want to do, and we want to continue lowering the effort to make the stability and testing even easier, right? So things like generating things like page objects is definitely among the things we are considering. And so then someday, who knows, maybe we'll get to absolutely zero effort from developers, right? Based on the feedback and how we evolve the framework. All right, I'm leaving the best for the last, and we're going to talk about observability. So observability, you might be familiar with the framework that Salesforce uses for observability internally. It's called AILTM. It is the platform that is behind the event monitoring product. So if you ever use that, you're basically using AILTM behind the scenes. And it was, created almost a decade ago. And, I spent, some time yesterday trying to find the picture that, captures a decade ago, and, made me feel kind of old. And, maybe that's doesn't make any sense to you, but that was, one of the pictures that definitely was like a gotcha for me. Like, okay, yeah, that happened a long time ago. But what is observability and modern observability, right? So currently ALTN is unstructured, right? And it's hard to parse, hard to process. Performance is terrible, for us, for developers, and we're not change that. So the framework we're working on is literally called observability, or O11Y, right? Compressed. Uh, we call it OLI for short. And it's schema based, right? So you define the schema of the events that you wanna project and collect. And Salesforce entities have their own events. So again, for basic things, you won't have to do any work. It's going to be scalable, right? One thing we learned with ALTM is if you're targeting, consumer businesses, right? B2C and B2B2C is it's hard, right? It's hard to today with something that was not designed for this. And observability framework from the ground up was designed for scale, and it's integrated. I think I touched on this already, but we are exploring the ways to integrate it across the Lightning Web Stack and throughout every part of the stack, like Lightning Web Components, to make components observable, Lightning Web Runtime to get you, life cycle events for your application. And I think that's basically it. Yeah, so that's a brief overview of everything we have in Lightning Web Stack under my team's charter. I'd love to answer some of your questions and maybe help you orient yourself even more in this world. But that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Bogdan. It was great presentation. And yeah, everyone, you can post your questions in Q&A. In fact, you can ask me to share your audio and screen. I can share your audio as well as video. You can directly ask your questions, and Bogdan is going to answer your questions. So I have a couple of questions here, Bogdan. Second, the first one is like, how is this Lightning DOM different from the Shadow DOM? Also,
I
can you
mean, you can
elaborate?
probably tell
Yeah.
from the name itself, shadow versus light, right? It's basically the opposite of the Shadow DOM, right? The Shadow DOM was designed for encapsulation and, quote unquote, hiding things from the view, right? And, it works great for some scenarios where you don't want, arbitrary components to touch and see, the internals of your component, right? But sometimes there are reasons why you actually want to reverse that, and you want, global scalability, right? And you like support themes and whatnot, right? Accessibility is one angle, right? It's not impossible, but it's relatively hard to make Shadow DOM components more accessible. And Light DOM is basically they're transparent for accessibility, right? You can cross-refer elements with labeled by, described by references, and it's all just going to work. So there are cases where Shadow DOM is super appropriate, right? So that has not changed. We stand behind Shadow DOM for most use cases. In some specific cases, you really need something different, right? And that's where the Light DOM kind of plugs into the picture and solves those problems.
Awesome. So one more thing, Bogdan, like we are currently using the Jest framework as a de facto framework for testing the LWC components. Is this um, what you call yeah, 1 second. This new framework you're talking about is going to replace this Jest framework, the UTAM.
Right. I wouldn't say so, right? Like the one thing I should mention is that The testing frameworks is a spectrum, right? There's right tools for individual jobs. So UTAM specifically makes UI testing much easier, right? But for example, you might be using other frameworks for performance testing, right? Or some other kinds of testing, right? And maybe UI testing framework is not the greatest tool for that, right? But I'm thinking of this more as another tool to help people test UI components better, right? The Jest framework, the best framework for performance testing are still there, right? If you're using them and they're getting you great results, I would say you should probably not change anything, right? Like if it sounds working great for you, I'm happy, right? However, if you're not testing UI because it's hard, if you're not testing UI because you try to do this and it's brittle, right, introduces more headache for you than it solves problems, then maybe UTAM is the right new tool for you. I see there's a question in the Q&A. So Satya, if I
Yeah.
answer your question, I'd love to get to it. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the question is, I heard there are testing challenges using tools like Selenium, Lightning Platform, LWC, etc. Will these updates minimize those issues? The answer is generally yes, and those are exactly the problems that I describe people are facing today. Selenium and WebDriver.io are kind of lower level ways to run the tests, and you still have to create the tests in kind of very non-trivial, non-readable way, right? You have to select the elements, you have to, send random events and keystrokes and whatnot. This is not great, right? So UTAM would still need some runner, so it would not remove the need for, Selenium or WebDriver. I think we're starting with WebDriver, unless I'm wrong, initial release, but we'll definitely keep working on new loader frameworks. And then UTAM takes care of a lot of kind of boilerplate selection stuff for you, logic, like exposes methods that you can run on your page objects. And I definitely encourage, like if you face some of the challenges using like lower level Selenium or WebDriver.io, like glance at utam.dev, you'll probably find some delightful news for your problems.
Cool. We have one more question from the community, Bogdan. Will this off-platform LWR come with the Lightning Web Security built into it?
Great question. Generally, yes, Lightning Web Security is part of Lightning Web Stack. And it's unfortunate that the acronyms collide and there's LWS working on LWS, right? So I'll have to expand them. But I'm not the expert on the Lightning Web Security. I'll be honest, it's created in the system team to our, right? But my impression and my understanding is that Lightning Web Security is going to get introduced to most, if not all, of the Salesforce components that we're going to be shipping, right? The existing ones and definitely the new ones going forward. And the Lightning Web Runtime by default uses Lightning Web Components as well, right? So you basically, like when you use Lightning Web Runtime, which is, again, the lower level application framework, you're going to get the benefits of the Lightning Web Security through Lightning Web Components inherently.
Awesome. So any of you, if you have questions, you can ask me to share your audio and video, and I can directly enable you to ask your questions. Please feel free to do that. And I have one more question, Bogdan. What's the plan of base writing components? I think there are there are still some base writing components that are not supported in the open source. What are the plans on that? Open sourcing more base components.
Right. I'll give you not very specific answer again because it's another team that's very close to us. That's not my team. So I know some plans. I know that they have a lot of work. Sorry, that they want to continue on their journey to keep modernizing, controls and adopting all of the lower level platform stuff that we're introducing, right? They basically build on top of everything my team is producing, right? And the future is good for them as well. They want to move to native shadow and like keep adopting the modern features that we introduced for better scalability and theming and everything else. You'll get accessibility by default for all of them. As for open source, I don't know. I'm not gonna try to give a low quality answer because I honestly don't know the answer to that specifically. But feel free to follow up with me on any of the public channels, and then find the answer for you.
Awesome. Thank you for taking that question as well. Bogdan, do you want to give any final messages or the way people can learn more about the Lightning Web Components, about the resources and all?
Right. I wanna reiterate the message that like whenever developers are in the Lightning Web Components journey, there's something for them. For slightly more advanced and the intro stuff, I cannot recommend the series of blog posts from Pierre-Marie Dartos enough. They are great source of like really getting the advanced kind of straight from the experts, the people who created the Lightning Web Components, right, and review thousands of Salesforce Lightning Web Components, right, and distill all of this expertise into very easy to read, visual, multiple examples guide, and it's fantastic. Like I deeply enjoyed reading this as I was ramping up on WC myself. Highly recommend this. This is a great source of information. It's pretty advanced though, so like maybe you should start with uh, that content, the Trailhead content, just to orient yourself into Lightning Web Component space before you would like jump into more advanced topics.
Yes, Trailhead is the way to go. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of these resources, and thank you so much for the session, Bogdan. The session was really interesting, and we got to know what are coming up for the LWC developers while they build the applications. And thank you, everyone, for joining this session today. So we have one more session that is going to start in another 10 minutes. But to attend that session, you may have to switch from this session to the other session. You can see a menu on the left side where you can click on that sessions icon and get to the other session. I request you all to transition to the other session. We have 10 minutes, almost like 9 minutes to start that session. See you there, and thank you. Thank you, Bogdan.